Okay, so we might just kick off, okay? There's just a bit of introduction there, and we have a nice bit of time. So just for those of you joining, Angie's just asked me to just kind of read out this short intro, okay? So this is a Republic of Work, Lunch and Learn. They're held every Tuesday, 1 p.m. webinar format, obviously, in the age of COVID-19. Variety of topics from a range of different businesses. Any of you guys that are here for the first time, you can find out all about what's coming up in the What's On section on the Republic of Work website. Okay, so that's republicofwork.com. Okay, so you're all very welcome, and thanks for taking the time out of your lunch. I suppose it's raining outside today. A few of you decided maybe not to have your 5K, your lunchtime 5K. My name is Ciarán Hourican. I'm managing partner of a training organization called H-training. Okay, so we've been in business since 1989, and like I suppose a lot of organizations, we're reflecting a lot. And now, can everybody still hear me there? Because I'm just getting a message here saying I've been signed out. You can. Okay, I'll just keep going. Okay. So we're looking at kind of the pivoting that a lot of people are talking about, right? As things kind of tend to change, and as we look at a new way of doing business, essentially, right? We've seen a version of what the future is going to look like, but for most of us, we're still grappling with what we're facing, right? It's very difficult to understand this and really get a grip on it, right? Now, what qualifies H-training to discuss change, right, and adaptation is it's probably the area that we specialize in most across all of the services we do, right? So primarily we would have operated as a learning and development organization in the area of leadership and coaching development. And many years ago now at this stage, probably 20 years ago, we expanded that portfolio to include interview coaching and kind of career services. And in addition to that, now we also provide strategic consultation to a lot of our clients, right? Now, the fundamental element in a lot of that, right, is change, okay? And we've witnessed it quite a lot from people pivoting in their careers to organizations trying to adapt and grow, which is, I suppose, where a lot of us are at the minute. Change is something that I'm very, very passionate about, okay? In a lot of the coaching work I do, I'm also a performance coach, and I work with teams to try and obviously get more out of them. You see, I suppose, the journey that people go through psychologically around change, okay? And that's something that I'm going to talk to you guys about today, okay? So that's just basically in a nutshell who we are, right? Now, in addition to this, I suppose a lot of what we do is people-centered, okay? I see a lot of lip service being paid to well-being, right? It's very much a buzzword. We see about mindfulness. We see organizations offering all these kind of supports to people, and that's great that people are doing that, right? But the reality I find of working life, and I see this across a lot of our corporate clients, right, is that like vulnerability is a very unusual word to hear, right? And it's kind of one of these double speak things, right? Is there room for people to be vulnerable in the workplace? And I think that's just an important question that we even just begin to ask before we get into answering it, right? A lot of what you see now, particularly as we live in a visual age, is the optics of who you are. There's this sense of being bulletproof, right? And just completely resilient, okay? Now, we all want to improve our brand and we all want to look good, but a lot of, I suppose, we might have reached kind of marketing peak, and I'm not criticizing that. I think it's very important that people get their brand out there and let people know what they're doing. But I suppose in this sense, it is difficult for people to kind of say that they're afraid, right? I've seen a lot of this recently in the previous 4 months when this massive change happened, and a lot of people were very much overwhelmed by it, okay? Now, vulnerability is stigmatized, right? And struggling is stigmatized, and it's stigmatized for a number of reasons, right? We find it uncomfortable. We find it difficult to talk about these things, right? And that's very much a human, I think there's somebody there unmuted. You might just maybe just check that you're all muted, and if you don't mind. Okay, so that's just kind of one part of it, right? Now, as we kind of move on from this, okay, like this is really the $1 million question, okay? We've experienced so much change, and even as we look to kind of emerge out of lockdown, that's changed again, right? It's been sped up. We're going to be able to get haircuts, right? Next week, we're going to be able to go to hotels. A lot of people have planned in the interim and they've planned long term, but the nature of the environment is so subject to change. Okay. There's a strong likelihood of second waves, and I'm not trying to depress people by saying that, but that is just one of the stark realities that we're faced with, right? Now, in all of this, we're trying to kind of consume information and get an idea of where we go next, right? It seems very much, I think, something that I see that's going to be staying is remote working. From all of my clients that I've talked to, the vast majority of them have said, we're not going to be back in our commercial premises in 2020. Now, that's a massive statement and a big change. And I've also seen a lot of people grow very, very comfortable with remote working. I mentioned going for your run at your lunchtime. I know people shattering all sorts of personal bests in terms of lifting weights and doing yoga and running, because now there's advantages to that. We have time, right? Which is kind of an aside. Now, the other part of this, and it's very important in terms of communication, is that there is a kind of only so much we can take of extreme information, right? Of like sensational news stories. There's definitely an element of coronavirus fatigue, right? The streaming kind of flashing banners that you see on the various news sites that you'll go to, eventually you do become kind of desensitized to those, right? And it's harder to kind of communicate a message, okay? I mean, take, for example, the Black Lives Matter protests in the States. A lot of people have talked about the momentum that they've gathered, but the danger being that people will just lose interest, or something else will happen and the focus will shift and they won't get to capitalize on those changes, right? Now, so this is all kind of by way of kind of, this is the best you can kind of do to explain where we are really. Like we don't know, right? And this, as any business owner or any business person, is to try and understand what the future will look like, okay? Where are we going to be? What's going to happen? It's very difficult to make a plan, a strategic plan, even a personal plan, a career goal based on this, right? And that really is our challenge. Now, this brings us really, I suppose, to the human part of what I want to talk to you about today. And this features a lot in all of my work, okay? I'm fascinated by the psychology that we have when we're confronted with difficulty and challenge, okay? In that sense, we have this, I suppose, survival psychology. Now, where does this come from, right? This is primal, right? And it's a survival legacy, right? We essentially have these very old brains, and the primary function of your brain has been survival, right, from day dot. And it's adapted in a number of ways to do this, okay? It's a part of why we're here, but our environment has sped up, and the rate of change has sped up so much that often we're surprised by how, I suppose, antediluvian our mindset is, right? We still have this kind of these triggers, but now we're sipping lattes. We're no longer on the savannah. We're no longer in an immediate threat. Now, that's not to say there aren't threats, right? But the same systems kind of go off and they function for us. And this is kind of what I'm talking about, right? I'm fascinated by our capacity for change, right? And I can speak personally in that regard. My own experience of change has been a very, very radical and a profound one, right? And that's part of why I do what I do, because I just love it. And I love supporting people to get to where they want to go, right? I firmly believe in our capacity to do that. However, we resist it, okay? We're afraid of change. We don't want to do it. And the question then being why, okay? Fear of the unknown, you can see I have that listed out there. And this kind of illusion of control, this sense of sameness, right? Many of us didn't want to go into lockdown, all of us probably, right? There's a lot of businesses have closed as a result of that. And that is really, that's second to the people who've actually lost their lives. Those are some of the big tragedies of this period that we've gone in, right? The other side of that is that we have all these triggers. We have learned experience, right? These reactions to fear and these psychological kind of triggers, right? Some of us have developed them in different ways based on our experience. The big trigger here probably being 2008, 2009, okay? Many of us worried in that time. Many of us experienced hardship. Many of us our businesses didn't go where we wanted them to go, or we had to reassess and look at different things. Okay. Now, there's some of you probably listening today who have a lot of experience of change and relish it. That's also a possibility. Okay. That and that kind of trigger, that challenge, something gets kind of set off inside you. I work with a lot of sales teams, and I suppose I work with a lot of high-powered kind of executives, and they're all over that kind of stuff. You know, they want to swallow it whole and take it on. You find that with founders as well, and kind of CEOs. Of challenge, and while we don't want to get overwhelmed, we don't want to consider. And I think finding that balancing, that kind of sweet spot, it's a challenge, right? So if we look down at the end here, I have this instinctive, this is the primal limbic part of the brain. So this kicks in when there's danger, right? In the exact same way, my son has, his grandmother bought him a kind of a wolf teddy, and it looks very real, right? And there's a couple of times I've walked into a room and just seen, like, is that actually a wolf in the corner? Like, it's very, very believable. And that's a part of that old primal trigger in me, just this kind of, there's danger here, that's what's going on. Now, we receive a lot of information today, obviously by the media, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. And these alarms go off when we experience them in terms of dread, in terms of anxiety. But there's also ways to hack those alarms, right? There's codes that we can punch in to kind of silence them, okay? But again, understanding this, first of all, is a really important part of this. I find this fascinating, right? People are always kind of talking about, if you look just down at the end of this slide, first of all, where it says negativity bias there, right? People are always talking about why Irish people are moaning and complaining all the time. Well, rest assured, it's not unique to just the Irish, right? This is a very human thing. We have a negativity bias. Why? Our brain's primary function is to keep us alive, right? If we see danger and we focus on danger and we focus on what's negative first, we have a better chance of surviving. Now, added to this, there's a kind of a pain-pleasure principle, okay? We seek out comfort, and this again has contributed to our survival. If you take it in a very kind of, again, if we go back to kind of a primal point, entire tribes have migrated across dangerous continents or dangerous areas to move to warmer climes, right? Now, we want comfort, we want survival, we want to go there. Now, that's very evident today even. Some of you will have read Sapiens. I have it listed there at the end as one of the books. I can't think of it. I always get the author's name wrong, so I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it. But he discusses that, like, why when we eat sweet things can we not stop? Why when you have a bag of whatever buttons or whatever your poison is it so difficult to stop eating them? A part of that is that if you happen upon a fig tree on the savannah in more primal times, figs were very sweet, and it behooved you to eat it as quickly as possible before a predator came along, right? Now, on a different way, that's still a part of our functioning, okay? We'll seek discomfort, we look to kind of maximize it, we'll keep going. Now, if you look at the kind of right side of the screen there, where we have the pleasure bias, this is where we will generally drift towards, right? That's why I have the arrows there. What's familiar, what we know, where we perceive we have control. The problem with this is that if we're never challenged and we stay in this comfort zone for too long, we tend to atrophy, okay? I've seen people struggle with kind of severe cases of anxiety and kind of agoraphobia and stuff like that. And what that can do is it can kind of tend to shrink your reality, right? So it becomes, I'm afraid of flying, right? And also I'm not going to fly. But then it becomes, I'm afraid in the car. And then it becomes, I'm afraid in the supermarket. I had a panic attack at the checkout. And then it becomes, I can't go outside, right? And increasingly that stuff can even shift to, I can't leave this room, right? Because it's like something is encroaching on you, right? Now, over in this painful place where none of us willingly want to go, that's the place where we grow. That's the place where we develop. That's the place where we find ourselves, right? And where we prove to ourselves how resilient we are and what we're actually capable of. Now, I'm not saying it's as simple as that. I'm not saying, you know, oh, just prove to yourself how resilient you are. there's a lot of our psychology prevents this, right, and pushes against it, and it can be exceedingly painful too, right? Now, if you take our current, I was reading this morning about kind of innovation and newer business opportunities that have emerged as a result of COVID-19. A lot of the kind of startups, like the guys in Dog Patch Labs, some of you on here are probably going to their first Fridays. I think Paddy was on that recently, and he was just talking about, like, there's a lot of opportunities emerge from a kind of a recession mindset, right? It's lean, there's pressure, we have to push harder, we have to figure out ways, right? A lot of companies try to duplicate that in better times, right? How can we get more out of our people, right? Where's the pressure? Where's the challenge? We definitely have that now. We're faced with that and we're confronted with that, but we have an enormous amount of resources, I would suggest, at our disposal in order to help us with this. Now, just to kind of re-emphasize that last point that I've made, right? Again, let's go back to the jungle, right? Or the cave, as it were. My survival depended on me understanding. We have two pictures here. We have a snake, but we also have a beautiful sunset, right? One is beautiful, the other is dangerous, okay? My brain interprets the dangerous one and it gives it priority because that information will keep me alive. The lovely sunset doesn't really serve a function, right? It's not going to help me to survive. It's not going to help me get through the day, right? This is how we operate. And this is why the threat will always get the priority, right? Over what's kind of nice. Now, a lot of us live relatively privileged lives in this part of the world, right? Where we may not experience these kind of threats on a physical level. No, that not all of us, I appreciate, but at the same time, we see these threats at the future. Some people see, I've spoken to a lot of people about kind of finances and worries about finance. And what I've actually seen is that there's a huge disproportion people have sometimes around fear of finance. And I'm not saying it's a challenge, particularly with children and mortgages. These are all realities, but I sometimes hear people talking about it in terms of annihilation, right? If I don't have the same income that I used to have, there's this sense, and it's a very real sense, that I will die, that I will not survive, I will not be able to eat. Now, fortunately, we have supports in place in this country where that won't happen, right? And they even extend to the self-employed now after a long and bumpy road. But anyway, and I suppose what I don't want to do in any of this is sound like I'm dismissing people's fears, right? Because please don't get me wrong on that, right? I do understand what it's like, and I do understand what the anxiety is like in the past few months. I've definitely experienced it myself, and it's not easy on certain days. Okay, there's a woman called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She's a psychologist. Some of you might have heard of her. She wrote an incredible book. I think it was 2004, 2005. And in it, the book was called On Grief, right? And in it, she identified the 5 stages of grief. Now, this is a process we go through, right? When we're navigating loss, okay? Attendant to that, right? Another word for grief is change, right? Or kind of realignment or something new happening. A lot of her kind of theories have been adopted by, like, industry analysts, change management experts, coaches, guys like myself, because it's the same process, right? We're letting go of something and something new is coming in. And in trying to do that, this is the kind of dance our mind goes through, right? And in a sense, what it does is it kind of in places softens the blow and it helps us. The word process is really key here. Denial, and this is the kind of early shock phase, right? Where we're not really kind of bought into it. Bargaining then is when we kind of say, yeah, maybe, and this is the fantasy land, right? Where you get a bit numb and it feels like maybe this hasn't happened, right? You hear people saying returning to normality, right? I would argue that a lot of that is a bargaining because we don't know what the new normal is, right? The new normal will look very different, okay? Definitely, I noticed around April in the lockdown that anger became very prominent. A lot of people would argue we live in the age of anger. There's something about social media, there's something about people on keyboards or behind platforms that tends to bring out some sort of ugly characteristic in it. I'd be very interested in Sam Harris's work on that. I don't know if any of you listen to Making Sense podcast, but his latest one about can we pull back from the brink, I just think is pitch perfect in regard to this. There's a real upsurge of anger and just contempt where it's become difficult to even have conversations anymore, right? And that's a real liability to us as people, okay? Now, the important thing with this, right, the last two there, we just have our depression acceptance, but the important thing to remember here is that this is a cycle, right? It's not, okay, I'm done with denial, okay, now I'm finished with anger, now I'm going through a bit of depression / loneliness, right? I know I accept it and it's over. You'll go through this in a cycle where you'll experience one and you'll jump back and you'll regress and you'll come forward, okay? In all of this, it's kind of, I suppose, the sense is there's something new being born to your mind, right? There's a new idea, right? Trying to kind of take root. And this is the process we go through. I say it with a lot of people in the coaching, because I see this with coaching, those first two, denial and bargaining. That's often the hardest hurdle that I have with people, because trying to get someone to acknowledge that there's a shortfall here, there's a difficulty, can really, really be difficult. Denial can be so profound, right? And like just door closed, you know, not willing to look at this despite all of this kind of evidence as to why it's harming me in my workplace or something like that, okay? Now, the other point in this, there's this exchange taking place the whole time, right? So there's two parts of us. We have a physical self and we have a mental self, right? Again, given our connection to devices and to information and the prevalence of that in our world today, the argument could be made that we spend the majority of our time in our heads, right? It's very little time now where there's silence. Somebody is always plugged into something, or there's a podcast playing, or you're meditating, which is an activity in itself. Or you're doing something active or you're working, right? With this kind of dance that goes on, forgetting about our physical selves is a real liability, okay? With any of those of you who are practicing mindfulness will know this, right? Mindfulness isn't really about getting somewhere, so to speak, right? Mindfulness is about observing what's going on, right? What's happening in your head and what's it feeding in your body. So again, I have a lot of experience kind of around anxiety and seeing people with that. And I would say it's definitely on the rise. Often there's a physical reaction and your brain interprets this physical reaction, right? So let's say there's a flutter in your stomach, your brain says, what's that, right? And it investigates further. And let's say based on the thought, the feeling in your stomach expands and grows. And the brain says, oh no, right? And that translates back. This constant exchange that's going on, right? That's how people experience panic attacks, right? Now, you can interrupt that process, right, early on, but kind of becoming aware of it. And again, I suppose the word strategy there over, that's a huge part of our capacity as human beings. I mean, in a sense, it's probably one of our very much our better qualities, in that we have that capacity strategy, like really on a grand scale, okay? And that's what we tend to do when we experience these animal feelings, right? Of fear and dread. We tend to get into the kind of lab and start coming up with plans for how to get out of it. And if you spend too much time in there, what happens is you just get chatter, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? Your mind takes off and you can't stop kind of thinking about it, and you're going over the same kind of stuff again and again in your mind, okay? Tara Brach has an incredible book, again, some of you probably know of her, called Radical Acceptance. And she talks about this. A lot of this stuff is stories that we tell ourselves, right? So there's a narrative, right? Everybody's narrative is unique to themselves. But if you can identify the story, I found this really powerful with people, right? What are you telling yourself there? What's the information? So recently I had somebody who had put in a lot of preparation for an interview, and they felt the interview didn't go as well as they wanted to. They haven't had the results or anything yet. But there was this real kind of visceral feeling of disappointment and upset and tears and emotion. And it was kind of like, this is about your suitability for a role, not about your value as a person, right? Now, it's easy, I know, for me to say that. Sometimes it's hard for us to delineate, but they really were in this kind of just trapped by this narrative, right? A lot of the time, again, those of you who had difficulties in 2008, into 2009, like many of us, that sense of, oh no, I'm going to go back there, right? Oh, there won't be enough. What are we going to do? Investigate that story. And even if you can become aware of it, I think it's a very, very powerful opportunity for you, right? Because if you can identify that, you can challenge it, okay? No, that's very difficult to do, I think, in isolation, right? You probably need a bit of support around that, okay. I suppose I've studied media, right? I've gone through a stage of kind of being obsessed with newspapers and how their kind of death, I suppose, in a sense, or change, and social media, and back in the days of terrorism and all the different messages that were put out around that, right? We're probably well past peak content. You hear people talking about peak oil all the time, right? Peak content, like, is long gone, right? The amount of information there is to consume, right? I used to get excited about even TV series, and now, oh, it's another 12-part series on Netflix that looks amazing, that I'm going to lose interest in after a couple of episodes, right? We're bombarded with information, right? And in one sense, it's great, because we've never had greater access to this. It's never been easier to learn and to develop and to give yourself more. But at the same time, our minds can only cope with so much information, right? We can only consume so much. So if you look at long-term memory and short-term memory, Dave Allen has a book called Getting Things Done. He's kind of the high priest of time management at the minute, right? And he talks about this a lot in that book. Long-term memory, we don't know its capacity. We've never gotten to a stage where somebody wasn't able to record a new long-term memory, right? Now, memory fails, but that's for different reasons, right? I'd say it's probably not long until people are able to tell you how many gigabytes your brain has and all that, right? Some people Ray Kurzweil, I think, made an estimate that it's like 1,000 terabytes or something like that, or gigabytes maybe. But short-term memory is actually very finite, right? And this is kind of, if you think of it, it's like the porch door, the porch into the house, right? We can only fit so much into our short-term memory. Some people would say maybe it's 6 things. Other people are better at kind of managing a number of things at a time. But because I do a lot of time management as well with people, and what I'm always saying to them, it's like the available RAM on your computer. If you have a load of different applications open, and I murder for this, there's less available RAM in your computer to do the functions that it needs to do. It's the exact same thing with short-term memory. If you're trying to cram everything in there, your mind isn't going to be able to kind of sort it and process it. So what happens is you get chatter, right? You're gunning the engine too fast, right? You're overworking the muscle. Now, I'm very passionate about news, right? I'm very passionate about robust and good information. I'm also keenly aware that media outlets have flaws and have failed. But what's happened is like this pay-per-click kind of thing, whereby it's clickbait, right? Companies a lot of the time are paid for how many people will click on an article, right? Now, that's from the Irish Times all the way to Breitbart News, right? It's the same kind of market, okay? If you tweak a story a certain way, I noticed the word that got to me more so over the previous few months was the word depression as opposed to recession, right? Depression has far deeper connotations, and it's not a word you hear often, right? Now, if I'm looking at a headline and I read the word depression, right, some quote for somebody, it could be worse than depression. I haven't lived through a depression. I've a couple of recessions under my belt, but I've never been there. Now, there is a sensationalist element in that. Now, again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, right? I don't know. But this is what we're talking about, the art of engagement, right? We're deeply distracted people, okay? You know, I can't remember specifically the amount of time you pick your phone up every day. I mean, it's shocking if you look at it. If you go to is it Screen Time or Nudge, I think is the one. You can get that app that annoys you to come off your phone and tells you how many times you've picked it up in the day. It's frightening how many times we pick up our phones and how, just fundamentally distracted we are. The amount of algorithms, the amount of really sophisticated, intelligent people out there trying to keep you scrolling, right, and keep you captured. That's a real challenge, right? The other thing I've noticed too is that most people don't seem to actually read news anymore. They read headlines, right? They draw their information from an actual headline, which is, you're getting a snippet, but you're also getting a snippet that is designed to keep you engaged and perhaps sensationalize you. I am a firm believer in traditional news organizations, right? And at the same time, I love guys like Jordan Peterson and I love guys like Joe Rogan and I listen to all that stuff too. But I read the Financial Times a lot during this recession and I felt it gave me a really good perspective on what's going on. And again, I'm always surprised when I go back to physical newspapers, how good they are and how well they're thought out and how much work they put into it. And I'm not saying they're perfect by any stretch of the imagination. The Currency is the other one that I spend a lot of my time on. I know a lot of people in business do that, and I think it's absolutely astonishingly good journalism. It is just the highest form of the art. That said, there's so much content on it. And when I go onto it and I read about another business that's gone to the wall or in under pressure, that doesn't serve me well, right? I don't have the time or the space to get into fake news, right? That's a longer conversation. That's a series of lectures in and of itself. Maybe it's something I'll do in time. The other thing I will say, right, there's a lot of fake news out there. The social media are probably the biggest culprits, right? Facebook being offender number one, okay? Added to this, right, there's this other strange phenomenon where people are now questioning themselves based on everything they read, okay? I know a lot of people asking me, is the Irish Times a kind of a Fine Gael mouthpiece, like, or RT kind of has a Labour element in it, and the Phoenix is always poking fun at those various news organizations. It's very hard to make your mind up and to understand what's real and what's not real. But I think we're too consumed by information and too worried about it that we're almost getting to the point where we'll trust nothing, right? And again, what does that do? It leads to anxiety and it leads to fear. Okay. Now that's just my 2 cents on that. Support. We might be witnessing an upsurge in anxiety. We definitely are. We're living through very difficult times and very dark times. There is a lot of stress. The guys in Dog Patch Labs as well did something recently on well-being. I'd really recommend it if you're not signed up with them already. You can access their archives. We also live in the age of support. Okay, I can really speak to this quite directly, particularly for those of you who are in Cork. The services that are available in the city are second to none, right? The communities out there, the people supporting people, counselling services, they're all gone online. Again, that access to information, really good quality information. I'll give you some of it as we go. Talking is the first thing. Now, talking to somebody who isn't going to criticize or judge you, who's going to support you and going to, help you to hear, or is going to try and hear what you're actually saying, right? It's so key. I cannot say enough about it, and I would extend my own offer of support to any of you on here struggling with any of the issues I'm talking about. Get in touch. I'm on H-training.net. Do not hesitate, right? People are important, right? And how we feel is important, and we tend to forget that in the churn. A lot of you are at home working remote, trying to manage kids, worrying about mortgage breaks, COVID payments, trying to work. Deadlines still have to be met. Commercial realities have become more stark. That is not easy, right? And you need support. You need someone you can talk to about it. I know a couple of people who are starting work at 5 a.m. to take the time off to mind their kids in the day, and they're going back online at 7 or 8 at night, and a couple of them have popped. It's just too much, right? And again, I recognize there's realities there. Exercising, I can't say enough about it. We need to move. We need to get out. For me, without it, my own mindset just changes, right? If I'm active, if I'm doing something, and I'm not saying you have to go out and run an Ironman, right? Start small, do something really, really small, and build momentum in those directions, right? And I've supported a lot of people with that. Challenge your story, identify it. So I'm really afraid. What are you afraid of? What's at the end of the tunnel? I'm looking into the dark abyss. Okay, but what's the monster in the dark that you're afraid of? Identify that, right? Be very specific about it, right? Because and then if you share it with the right person, you can start to unpack it, right? And look at it. My own experience of anxiety and fears, they can be deeply irrational, but that doesn't make them any less painful. Okay. Humor is very much a survival mechanism, right? It's how we've gotten through wars, recessions, bad times. We have a tremendous capacity for that. Okay. The other thing too is I'm not preaching a stress-free life. Okay. Stress is a big part of what makes us human. Okay. If you have too little stress, it's actually quite stressful. Okay. Some of you might have experienced that over this period, but there's a balance. Too much stress is just as bad for you, obviously. But getting to that place, that happy medium, right, might be a little bit of a nirvana. Okay. But I would probably be more afraid of not enough stress than I would of too much stress. Okay. Remember, we're hunters, right? Primarily, we need a challenge. We used to wake up every morning and have to go and find food, right? Sapiens used to run marathons every day, 20, 26 miles, right? We're sitting at home thinking about ourselves. It's not natural. Okay. There's energy that's not being used up, right? And again, I'm only going to touch on this. We've developed a remote working program for remote leadership program. There needs to be a balance between the physical space you occupy when you're working and the place you inhabit in the evenings. Now, some of you mightn't have that option, but delineate. I've become very strict with myself on the laptop at the kitchen table, right? And every now and again, I forget about it. That kind of work creep. Okay, make sure that you're going somewhere where you're separating from the space where you work. The Republic of Work is open again. That greatly helps with that too. Okay. Now, I didn't get enough time to talk about these the last time I presented here. This first book here, Dr. Terry Lynch is Ireland's, he was a GP who went and requalified as a psychotherapist, and he's world renowned. And he has a series of books. The first one he wrote was Beyond Prozac. They're published by Mercer Press in Cork. And his other one is Selfhood. I cannot recommend that book, Selfhood, enough. No, it's not easy reading. You're not going to fly through it. But it's one of those ones you can check in with. And it's just so good. And he emphasizes responsibility, right? It's our responsibility, ultimately, what we do with our business. This is how we get them back on track. That starts with you managing yourself, okay? That's the first thing. I've mentioned radical acceptance to Tara Brach. That may not be for everyone. It kind of echoes some Buddhist teachings. She's also an academic. She's a podcast too. It's quite good. That's Sapiens, Yuval Noah Harari. There's the name. Really recommend that. I just finished the second one, Homo Deus, which is disquieting about where we're going, but it would really help you understand. Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. I mean, this is fundamentally about the unreliability of our minds in terms of decision making and the places we go and the stories we tell. It's kind of a weird read because you come away, you know, I won't say not trusting yourself less, because I think it's important to have confidence in your actions and stuff, but it helps you to question our rationalizations and our processes that little bit better, a little bit clearer. The last one there is Theodore Zeldin. I mean, that is such an incredible book. That's a history of human emotion. I think I have it actually just there behind me. That's what it looks like. It's big enough, but it's just so beautiful. It's about people and how we function and where we come from and how certain fears can help us overcome other fears. It's particularly in depth. It's one I'll probably go back and read again. So that's it in a nutshell, I think, from me. Now, I haven't been able to check in here as I've been sharing the screen, so I don't know if people have been messaging me there now or not. Let me Let me just stop this now 1 second. There we go. Okay, any questions? Anybody want to, Jimmy Ritter, personal suggestions of a book that I love, Atomic Habits. Thanks for that, Jimmy. Great to learn about how to manage things to better 1% every day. Definitely would suggest. Thanks for that. I've actually seen James Clear. He's a pretty good guy. Thanks, Laura. Anybody, any comments, guys? Anybody like to come in and maybe just add to some of what I've said, or any interest in kind of asking me any questions? You know, there's a bit of time. I know some of you might want to run away, but feel free. You can unmute yourself and just pop in.
Hi.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, how's it going? Yeah, just I found it really, really interesting, you know, you know, what you said about radical acceptance there by Tara Brach as well. You know, like, you know, if you're going for a job, or if you're, you know, not getting picked for a team or whatever, like, it's about suitability for a role, like, you know, and it's just, you know, we can attach it to ourselves, you know, like myself, I went for a bursary for this, and, you know, you really take it personally, you know, and I suppose to isolate that and to just, it doesn't mean your self-worth. It's about, you know, their opinion of a job that they want done, you know, but it doesn't actually kind of define you, kind of. I suppose it's good to kind of keep that in mind. So thanks very much, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for your comments. And I guess, I suppose it is easy for me to kind of say that, don't take it personally. Look, we're human beings at the end of the day, and we do that, and we all have moments. Look, I'm very passionate and vested in the work that I do, but I suppose I think DC and me were talking about this recently, like, there's that business kind of persona that you tend to put on at times, you know, where you're dealing with, I don't know, somebody in the financial sector, or somebody where you just get into that kind of zone of, you know, look, we have to bolster ourselves and stuff like that. But thanks for that, Paul. Anybody else, guys, you want to come in there?
Yeah, hi, Ciarán. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, fire away. Hi, Laura.
Brilliant. And I don't mean to put you on the spot either with this one, but I'm asking a load of people this as we're coming out of COVID, hopefully. If you had the time back over the last 3 months, would there be anything you may have done differently?
That's a good question. No, maybe, and look, you probably can relate to this, Laura, as a coach, right? Whenever I get time, I try and invest in it as wisely as possible. I've added a stone of muscle. I've increased my mileage. There's a few things on the website that I've been able to optimize. I'm pretty satisfied with what I've done in the last few months. The thing I probably would do, and I could say this all the time, is maybe be a bit easier on myself. I know that might sound a bit trite, but that's the best. I'd really be interested in your answer to that question. Well, I put you back on the spot.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a lot of power in humility, vulnerability. And I would hope, if I had the time again, taking more time for myself and my business. It's only now I'm coming around to business development stage, but I'm not being hard on myself either. People like yourselves, we're in demand during these times to help and support others. But I actually really enjoyed your presentation. It was really refreshing. Nice to see the psychological elements coming out, and it's quite supportive. So well done. Great job.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Laura. Thanks for coming along. Anyone else, guys? Jimmy, I'll just read your comment there. Great presentation. We definitely need to manage time better. I do use an app called Be Focused and use the Pomodoro technique. It works basically 25 minutes focus working with 5 minutes of rest. It's great to not feel overwhelmed. Yeah, I've heard a lot about that Pomodoro technique, but I haven't actually gotten to it yet, so thanks for that. If anyone else doesn't have any more questions, we can maybe wrap up. Anybody else like to chime in? Hi, David.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ciarán. Very good presentation. Just one thing I found quite challenging working from home all the time in the last few months is, and I relate to your slide there on stress and lack of stress.
Mm.
Have you any tips in kind of putting challenges in the day, you know, so you get a bit more kick out of it? Like I thrive on meeting people. A lot of my job is sales and presentations and that kind of thing. So when I'm not cooped up in a home office or whatever, you know, I tend to get cozy and comfortable, and I can't remember the other things on your slide, but all of those, whatever they were. Have you any tips in kind of, you know, keep it real and, you know, getting up in the volume a bit, you know?
I think that's a really good question, and it's something I get asked a lot. And my approach to kind of, because like there's a momentum element to that, right? When you come home and if you start to feel too comfortable, right? And someone mentioned atomic habits there as well. It's to make very small incremental changes in the right direction, you know. And if you build on those, you know, I mean, I've experienced a lot with diet. I've experimented a lot with diet over the years, and I always aim too high, you know. I cut out sugar completely, gluten-free, all this other crap, and I last a week. You know, it's the New Year's resolution syndrome, you know, and we hate ourselves so much after Christmas that we fly into it and we're going to be the best ever, you know, and it's just not practical. And I think it's to recognize that look, this is very difficult time, and many of us are having a wobble here and there, right? And particularly extroverts, people who thrive off people and enjoy being around people. Okay, we have Zoom, but look, let's face it, it's not the same as if I was with you there now. We would be interacting in a much different capacity. But I suppose it's trying to kind of get the ship going in the right direction and build on that momentum. You can meet people now from a distance, and the people that you feed off, I suppose it's to try and capitalize on that and bring it in that right direction, you know, just keep tipping away at it, because I would notice the Xbox calling on occasion, you know, and I just know it's just not a good idea, you know, because I'll be really good at Call of Duty, but my business may suffer, you know. I hope that helps, Paul. It's maybe kind of a general enough answer, you know.
Great, thanks.
David, sorry, thanks, David. Natasha, you're just making the point about meditation there. There is plenty of them on YouTube. Like, I'm of the Sam Harris fraternity. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea. He can be a bit controversial at times, but I have his app, the Waking Up app. If you guys actually want, reach out to me, because I can give you a free month of that, because I'm a subscriber. Don't hesitate there, just even in the chat, because I can issue a different code for everyone. I can't say enough about mindfulness. I just can't say enough about it. I think it's really, really powerful. And just to your second point there, I feel we need to be a bit gentle and realistic in our efforts, and to be gentle on ourselves. If deadlines are unrealistic, change them, and don't be hard on yourself when you do. Like, I couldn't agree more with that, Natasha. I suppose I am, and some of you will probably appreciate this too, I'm always trying to kind of walk that delicate balance between commercial realities. Now, I think people are more important, but I do get the commercial realities are very, very important. They're a lot of the time it's just the bottom line. People will be even less well off if we don't realize this. It's a difficult one. It's a real difficult one. Again, I don't like the window dressing of well-being and then sending people emails at 10 o'clock on a Friday night and ruining their whole weekend. You know, I think there's something really incongruous about that. And I said this the last time I did this presentation, the Industrial Revolution happened, unfortunately, quite some time before Sigmund Freud came on the scene. So we didn't know much about ourselves as people when we created this way of doing business, and that legacy still continues, really. It's very hard to understand, but yeah, I think we really need to be more gentle with ourselves, and that responsibility starts at home. It starts with us. You look after you first, because other people can be a real distraction and trying to worry about them and help them and stuff like that, you know. So thanks for those comments, Natasha. Any other takers? Thanks, Margaret, for your comment there as well.
Sorry, just Paul again.
Yeah.
Just a quick one. I suppose, you know, you're just saying about doing, you know, having your to-do list or whatever, trying to get stuff done, and then maybe not achieving it, and, you know, being gentle with yourself, and then going to bed. But getting up in the morning, you seem to put on that heavy coat of all the stuff you have to do again, the stuff that you didn't get done. Can sometimes get heavier every day because you didn't achieve all the stuff, and there's more stuff from the stuff that you didn't, that kind of build up. And I'm saying, oh no, be gentle with myself, but really it's clogging up. It's just building up, you know.
And yeah, I can relate to that so much. I think probably everybody can relate to that so much, Paul. Like that's the real challenge. There are only so many hours in the day, right? There's only so much that you can do in a day. Now, again, that doesn't help. But I think the reality in what you're talking about there, that is, if you get overwhelmed by what you can't do, you're less good at what you can do, you know? And that kind of blockage and that intensity, I find myself with that. I'll be able to go back there in a while. The example I always use is the Kingsley Hotel. Saturday evenings when it was open, there's some guy starts playing the piano in there around 5 o'clock. And if I'm under pressure and there's a lot going on, I don't care who I have to meet or what's going on, I will be up there with a book, and I'll make myself sit there, and I'll put on the blazer, and I'll put one leg over the other leg. I'll cross the legs. I'll spend whatever it is, $5.50 for a cup of tea up there, and I will sit there for an hour and a half. And what that does for me mentally, I couldn't begin to describe it, you know. And it's that point of, because we're always on now. I made the mistake of looking at an email last night at 11:30 in bed, and it kept me awake a little bit longer. If you can get that mental space, you know, you will be much better at what you can do. And I think meditation definitely speaks to that. It's you know, meditation is a practice too. It's not going to happen straight away. It's something you get better at. But if you can give yourself a mental break, right, that helps, you know. My mother started our business, was always Hello Magazine, you know. Mine is NBA basketball, you know, or Call of Duty. I need to go somewhere where my brain doesn't work, where I can switch it off and give it what it needs in order to come back much stronger.
Brilliant.
You know. Okay, thanks for that, Paul. And I think, look,
thanks very much.
You're very welcome. And Natasha, your comment on the end there, you're nervous about the stress that is ahead when business is fully open. I can second that. Okay, I went into Republic of Work just, I think, Thursday before last. I'm going in there tomorrow again as well. And I just wanted to support the guys because I think they've been great during this. And I was having to walk like 20 minutes to get to work. I was having to go somewhere and find my lunch. I wasn't able to work out on my lunch break. There was people, and Caroline was wearing her mask, showing me the quarantine room if anything went wrong. And I found myself getting anxious. I was thinking, why did I leave? You know, I'm looking at fields and greenery out here, and that's going to be a really difficult transition back in. But we do that slowly, you know, and we do it one little bit at a time. You know, and I think to Laura's comment there too, that's very powerful. You know, we've overcome worse before. We will overcome this again. There's a lot of ability in this Zoom meeting. There's a lot of ability in this city. We've an interconnected world. We have huge capacity. You know, who knows? But there's a challenge ahead. But we're able for it. I'm working with our team to see where we can get rid of unnecessary processes and procedures, as well as seeing where we can reduce stress. Stress is so contagious. I couldn't agree more. You know, people tend to spread stress around. And again, simplifying things. There's a startup I work with kind of under strategic direction in Waterford, and they've actually found that by now doing all their conference calls and Skype, they communicate better, you know, because you have to, in that manner, you have to do it better. There's no kind of, we have to get them in an office and we have to get them here. At the same time, there's no easy fix for this, you know. It is going to be a challenge, but we can come through it. Just before we wrap up, I just want to maybe pay tribute to my great mother, Helen Hourican. She started H-training in 1989. She's been my mentor. She's been everything. She's currently in CUH. with leukemia, and we have not had good news about it, unfortunately. So I just want to have a word for her. She is categorically my hero, and we're really struggling with that news. But it helps to be in here and to carry on her great legacy. And thanks everybody for helping me do that. Thanks very much, Laura. I'm going to leave it at that, folks, because I can't go much longer after speaking about that. But I really appreciate your time. Thanks very much, David, and thanks, Margaret. Thanks, folks. I really appreciate it. Stay safe. Get in touch. I'm on H-training.net if there's anything I can do, and hopefully we'll see you in the flesh soon, so to speak. All the best. Thank you.